everybody, and welcome meeting of a meeting of the Cabinet. Lynn, don't pass that to your right. Sign it and pass it. Left. No, don't pass it left. Sign it and pass it right. So I think we have congratulations for 2 people for birthdays today, or one for yesterday, one for today. So Mr. Balfe, congratulations, 40 again. And David, Mr. Councillor Ashmore, congratulations on being 40 yesterday. It doesn't want everybody to know it's now being broadcast. So folks, I'm not sure, we probably shouldn't sing in Cabinet, should we? Graham, should we sing in Cabinet or not? Definitely not, all right. So no happy birthday singing, sorry. So, ladies and gentlemen, apologies for absence. 2, 4, 6, 8. So we are missing Mr. Pitt, who I'm sure will be here. Any declarations of interest, ladies and gentlemen? No. I'm sorry, it's a very long agenda. Record of previous decision meetings. Colleagues, you happy with the minutes 29th of October and 5th of November? Great. Lee, Councillor Lee.
I just wondered before we got going, I know it's a very long agenda, we just might reflect a little bit on Councillor Karen Elkin's departure, as it were.
And also, I don't know if as well as people know that former Councillor Caroline Scott has also died. So, as we get, I'm sure when we get to the council meeting that we will do a minute silence for them. But yes, thank you, Lee, for reminding us of that. Mr. Pitt, any declarations of interest?
No, Leader.
No. Unless Mr. Ward has, but Mr. Ward has been promoted to be a councillor. Okay. So we have 2 people who want to speak. Mr. Charles Burns on the recycling one, and then Graham on Play Streets. Is it okay if we do it in the order they're published on? Because I'm sure they're not going to be hugely long. Is that all right? Okay. Colette, good morning. Do you want to leap in to give us a quick introduction on where we are with recycling options?
Yeah, thank you. So the purpose of the report I'm bringing today is to update you all on the outcomes of the food waste trials, and also to present options for you to reduce waste and improve recycling in Portsmouth. The recommendation that we're making today is to expand the food waste trial to provide an additional set of trials of separate weekly food collection. As you'll be aware, we collect curbside refuse weekly and recycling fortnightly. We also collect small electrical items fortnightly in the recycling, and our waste service is supported by a network of bring banks for glass, textiles and cartons, along with the Household Waste Recycling Centre, or the TIP, which is located at Port Solent. And residents can also subscribe to a fortnightly garden waste collection service. However, Portsmouth currently has one of the highest household refuse kilograms per person in the county, and our current recycling rate is 25.5%, which, although it's up from the previous year, is still one of the lowest recycling rates in the country. We have reduced the amount of waste going to landfill, so in terms of landfill diversion, we're one of the best performing local authorities. And the moves to introduce wheel bins and a bag allowance in October 2018 have reduced our refuse by 4,300 tonnes a year and increased recycling by 600 tonnes a year. We've also installed some carton bring banks at sites across the city, which are being well used. We decided to trial a food waste collection service because a waste composition analysis found that just under 40% of the black bag waste was food, with about 30% of that being avoidable food waste, so food that's gone out of date or is uneaten. This amount, this percentage of 40% is greater than the other waste types in the black bag waste and was felt an area we can make the biggest impression. We've carried out food waste trials over 13 weeks in Drayton, Portsea and Old Portsmouth, Southsea and Baffins, and just over 8,000 homes participated. The food waste we collect is sent for anaerobic digestion and will count towards as the recycling as it produces a biogas and a digestate which is used by farmers. Over the 13 weeks of the trial, 61% of the residents placed out their food waste collection caddy for collection each week, and that's quite high compared with other local authorities. Our nearest neighbour that does it, East League, about 50% participation. And what we've managed to do is get 20% of the total waste collected each week is being collected now as food waste, so that will go towards our recycling rate. Additionally, we wrote to all residents who weren't participating to try and understand why not, and we got a wide range of reasons back, from that they don't produce any food waste or the dog eats the leftovers. There's a wider range of information available on that. But what we also have done is looked at the rubbish presented by those residents, and we have found that there is still food waste and mixed recycling in many of the black bins where people aren't participating in the food waste service. 881 households in the scheme replied to our feedback survey, with 93.19 responding that they were satisfied or very satisfied with the food waste trial. We did extend it during the trial to 7 blocks of flats, which included 134 households, and it would be possible to extend the trial to blocks of flats where there's sufficient room to place a communal food waste bin. We've had good feedback from the company where we take our food waste, that it's been largely contamination free, and if separate weekly food waste collection was rolled out across the city, it could improve our recycling rate by about 6 to 8%. The government are...
I'm going to need to hurry you up.
I know, okay.
Very, very long agenda, Colette.
Okay, so I'll move on to the rationale for the option. So as the administration, you're keen to respond to calls to develop more recycling. So option 2 is to continue with the existing food waste trial, but also add another set of rounds in, which we've hopefully got funding for until September 2021. The funding will be subject to approval of the full council of the 2021 budget. Did you have any other questions?
Guys, thank you very much indeed for that, Colette. I think the only other thing I would put in terms of recommendation, and David, I don't know what your view would be, is to make sure that we put an additional recommendation that we aim for the rollout of food waste recycling to all homes in the city as part of the new waste collection contract, which commences in September 2021. To make sure that we've signalled where we're going, and it's sensible in letting that contract for people to know exactly what we're after as well. David, Mr. Ashmore, as portfolio holder, would you like to add anything? You have a plethora of microphones.
It's presidential, isn't it?
Indeed.
Thanks for that report, Colette. Yeah, it's a really important one. Recycling, historically, we've been low on the list of people that recycle well. So we've been looking at ways we can improve our rankings, if you like. Most of the messages I get from people, from residents, are can you increase recycle this, or can you recycle that? So it's there from the public. People want this. People want to see us do better. People have come up with ideas. The mandate is there from people to do that. So we've managed to do things, I think Colette said, didn't you? We've managed to put things in like the carton banks, and we've managed to put extra glass recycling bring banks there. And you've also might have noticed around the city, you've probably seen the little pink chewing gum bins that we've done there. That's made out of, I believe, is it recycled chewing gum? Which, I don't know how they do it, but it's done. But that's going the right way. Also, little cigarette things you've seen gone up, and they've got like little opinion polls you can. I don't think you'd settle Brexit with it, but it's there. It makes sure they don't go on the floor. you know, people also going about plastic, and that's something that I want to say that we really need to join in and get manufacturers to take some responsibility for that, because plastic, although it's a menace, you know, the recycling markets are down for it. It's not very practical if you concentrate on plastic, and I don't know if you've seen reports, you might have listened to stuff on the radio or seen stuff on the BBC, but sometimes it's horrendous really that, you know, the plastic gets collected but then it just gets left because there's no way of actually recycling it practically. There's no way of sustainably doing it. So it made sense that as food waste is a huge percentage of what goes in the bin waste, that we concentrate on this. We noticed what the other areas were doing locally, and our take up on it has been absolutely beyond what we thought, you know, and it's been overwhelmingly positive from the members of the public about this. In fact, the only complaints I get is when people aren't in the scheme, they're like, can we have it rolled out to us too? So it really is good to see that. So, you know, and intertwined with that as well, we've got, you know, we want to make this a bold vision as well. So we, you know,
David,
put stuff in there with an anaerobic digestion. I'm getting there. I'm just really passionate about this, leader. But it's like we talk about the anaerobic digestion, and then it turns it into biofuel and stuff, which could then go on to power vehicles, collection vehicles, which would be a circular economy. So it's all round good. So yes, I'm very pleased with that, leader.
Thank you, and my apologies, Charles. I forgot to call you down. Yeah, I am now. So Charles, welcome. I'm sorry not to do it in the right order.
Okay, thank you, Leader. The report is useful, and what I consider to be sensible recommendations, which I hope you will approve, but I'm a bit concerned with the political enthusiasm to maximise food waste collection, which is missing a trick or two. As a post-war bulged child, I remember my mother going into Pinks and Havant with food coupons, so nothing could be wasted. Meal plates had to be cleared. Any scraps and vegetable peelings went into the compost heap. Only coal-fired grate ash and cans went into the metal dustbin. The need to source food and minimise waste has stayed with me, so I'm concerned to see how much food is thrown into Portsmouth waste stream. I believe there's one of these in the room. Growing and transporting food consumes huge amount of energy, so I suggest that, having acknowledged the climate emergency, the city should be looking for creative ways to educate, encourage and enable residents to source, prepare food to have healthy meals, including using leftovers to minimise what is tossed into the waste stream. As food collection is transferring messy stuff to weekly emptied food caddies, then surely those areas which enjoy the service could have black bins emptied on a once every 2 or even 3 weeks basis, which would provide a way to rework the waste collection and disposal resources. I have experienced an alternative waste collection in Havant on the Isle of Wight with a block of flats, and where my son lives in Arbroath, all of which work well. And whilst I understand the reason for politicians wishing to maintain weekly waste collections in the city, the justification changes where there is weekly food waste collection. Thank you.
Charles, thanks very much indeed for that. I think you're right. I am marginally younger than you, but I grew up in an environment where you didn't chuck food away and leftovers were made into something else, as happens at our house. The bit that really worries me is that generations of people are going through school without being taught how to cook, and if you don't know how to cook, you inevitably live on stuff that somebody else has cooked, so ready meals and things like that, which are very expensive, bad for the environment because they're inevitably in plastic stuff. They're not nutritionally good for you, and one of the big things that the government could do is to reintroduce proper cooking lessons for everybody in schools, because we're getting to the point where a whole generation of people don't know how to cook, and if one generation doesn't know how to cook, they can't teach the next generation. Charles, on your second point, alternate weekly collections, not on the agenda, sorry. Darren.
Firstly, thank you. To respond to one of Charles's points, in the Council's Adventure Playgrounds that it runs, it works quite a lot with Food Cycle and with other organisations to encourage the very sort of cooking that Gerald was talking about. Having been there and having done a worse job than most of the children in terms of cooking, I can justify how good they are. So this is not the package. There are other things that are going on. I would just say that I think that this is a sensible long-term approach to something that just hasn't changed for decades. In Southampton, students are now picking up food waste recycling, and I'm delighted that we're doing it and not students. So we're being proactive and we're taking the sensible long-term approach to this. As we go forwards, it'll be interesting to see how this will work in council blocks. I think that'll be something we'll look at, and also how it will work in HMOs as well. And I'm delighted some work has already been happening. As with Dave, I have residents in my ward who are on the other side of the road from the food waste pilot, and all I get from them is, when can I have it? I'm sure that we can roll it out. This is a sensible long-term approach, and I would support it entirely, Gerald.
Thank you. Steve.
Yes, thanks. It wasn't actually mentioned in the report, but I think I'm right in saying, Colette, that we do know that once people become very aware of how much food they're wasting, it does actually have a positive impact in reducing that, doesn't it?
Yeah, and definitely anecdotally we've had that back from residents who've said that they didn't realise they threw out so much bread and things like that, and they've changed their shopping habits. But that is one of the usual benefits of it. And I agree also that waste minimisation is our focus, needs to be our focus.
Leader, may I? Just as a point.
Hold on, Lee, hold on. There is a queue.
I can't hear. Because people are getting the microphones too far away from their mouths.
So we need to be loud, ladies and gentlemen.
No, not loud. Just bring the microphone up to the...
Okay, Steve, can you be more distinct?
The other thing I was... Is that better, Lee? The other thing I was going to add was that there's different ways to raise awareness around this. I know that when I was away last weekend, Councillor Ashmore attended the emptying of the Tread Gold's fish down at Portsmouth Cathedral, where it currently resides. As a City Council, we've been working with Pete Codling to move that around the city and raise awareness. We collected 6,000 plastic bottles out of that. It's a huge amount, and it will continue to do the tour over the next year or so, but it's actually prompted something else that's being brought forward in the capital budget, which is around changing the way we collect rubbish around the seafront, and initially in Commercial Road and Palmerston Road as well, around splitting out our waste bins so that we have bottle receivers on one and can receivers on one side to try and improve the amount of recycling that we're taking out of the waste stream there too. So there's always more that we can do. I'm pleased that we are, and I'm pleased that art's playing a part of it.
Okay, Rob?
Colette, just on 4.7 considerations, I'm just interested where you talk about the risks there that in putting the food waste, that will make a capacity for people to fill up their bins even more. So you said it's a risk. Are we doing anything about it? Because I agree with you. I think at the end of the day, humans have a great capacity to create as much rubbish as they can fill their bags, and we need to actually be proactive about it.
But actually, Rob, our experience is not like that at all. It's the exact opposite. We've had a fall off by introducing the black bins, which restrict the amount of waste people get. We're getting less waste and more recycling. So the experience in Portsmouth is the exact opposite of your perception. Colette.
I think we have managed to reduce some people who had larger bins where they're putting food waste out. We've managed to persuade them to go back to a 140 litre bin, and we do monitor those things. We continue to monitor all the tonnage on a month-by-month basis, so it will be a focus for the team.
Okay.
And everyone.
Folks, people often ask me, why are we doing food waste and not plastics? And I think that the tonnage here is really interesting. On 3.6 there we've got potentially 17,470 tonnes of food waste that we can take to recycling, and it looks as if from the figures that we're doing on the trial that we get a really good proportion of that. If you look at the amount of plastics we do, only 2 out of 10 bits of plastic that we collect can be recycled. The rest of it still goes back to be burnt or landfilled. So that's only 1,284 tonnes of plastic that can be recycled. If we're serious about the environment, we should be trying to make the biggest impact possible, and that's why the food waste is the logical thing to do. I don't want us to be in the situation where it seems to be in some councils where we collect plastic waste and people feel they are recycling when they're not. And it's just going to get burnt or buried even so, or worse, sent to the third world. So I think we need to be upfront with people and not do stuff just to make people feel better, but actually because it makes a real environmental benefit. So colleagues, going back to the recommendations, with the recommendation that I've added about making sure that we do this when the contract's up in September 21, that we do this for the whole city. Colleagues, are you happy with that recommendation? Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, David and Colette and all the team for all the work. Okay, thank you. Moving on, Play Street. I'll try not to make the same mistake. Graham, welcome. Good morning. Let me get the correct bit on Play Street. Okay, we don't have a Tristram. Michelle, come and Michelle and Michelle's shoes. My view that people only need 3 sets of shoes, one black, one brown and one for the weekend, has been rejected by Michelle, who has told me that she has more than 3 sets of shoes, which is... Anyway, Michelle, do you want to introduce it and then we'll go to Graham? So, yeah, leap in, but just don't take too long because we got a vast agenda.
Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michelle Love. I'm the Safer Travel Manager and I work within the Regeneration Service under Tristan Samuels. So I'm here today to present the Play Streets report. The reason that it's coming here is because it rolls across quite a number of directorates. But Play Streets, for those of you who don't know, is a scheme where on a Sunday afternoon we will close a road, residential road usually, and allow children out to play. So sort of harking back to maybe more old-fashioned times. It works in cities because obviously people don't have maybe time or access to green spaces. They also maybe don't have the time to meet their local community. So Play Streets came about through a lot of active councillor consultation with residents within the Southsea area, and a particular resident came forward and was very proactive. So councillors and residents have worked together to carry out 2 trial Play Streets, which were carried out last summer. They proved very successful. We had a lot of very positive feedback. It was Francis Avenue in Southsea that was closed for around 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon. And all of the feedback was that people really valued the time that they had in order to be able to meet their neighbours, have their children play out, basically enjoy some community time without it being difficult at all to be able to access that time. In terms of technicalities, the way that we're going to set it up is the way that a lot of councils have set it up, in that we will write a suite of documents to make it very easy for residents to be able to pick them up and organise their own Play Street. We will offer technical advice. We will advertise the road closure under the Towns Police Clauses Act. We will help them assess their traffic management needs. We will have the signs required to ensure that those closures are legal, and we will submit any of the streetworks notices that are required. So we will carry out basically all of the technical background stuff. The residents will be in charge of actually running the Play Street themselves. So the end game is to have a core group of residents that form a Play Streets committee that will go out and hold quarterly meetings. They'll be able to register as a charity to fundraise if they want to, and they will advise any other residents coming forward on how to put the play street together. That's about it, really.
Great.
But if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you. Graham, good morning, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Leader. I wanted to divide my remarks into three, really. One is about the decision-making process. Second is a bit about the actual proposal. And the third is to comment on something which is actually in the report relating to school street closures. I noticed you've mentioned a few times you have a very large agenda, and I noticed that because obviously the general election slowed up decision-making. And I wasn't quite clear why this was actually here, because this item, we had a TNT meeting, there was one item on it, and I thought, well, why is this here? When I asked officers, they said it was a leader's decision. So I thought,
it was.
Okay. The point is that this item is not clear why, because the other report, item 7, says it's cross-party because it's a cabinet decision because it's the more than one decision portfolio involved. But this one isn't a policy item because you've already decided on the policy. This is merely an implementation report, and I wasn't quite clear why it couldn't come to the TNT meeting. And in fact, if you look at the report, it is actually drafted as though it's going to go to TNT, because it says the person who's going to sign it is Councillor Stagg. So I was a bit surprised. Also, you do criticise members for not turning up to decision-making meetings, and that means that I've had to do 2 meetings rather than 1, and that's obviously a bit of a problem, but not a major problem. But I'm just hoping that maybe we get a bit more clarity about why decisions are made to bring things to Cabinet rather than to the Cabinet portfolio holder. I'll pause there if you want.
Oh, no, it seems to me entirely clear that this covers a range of different portfolio responsibilities, particularly involving children. Play streets are designed to encourage children to play, and therefore it covers more than one portfolio, and the rules say that something that's cross-portfolio needs to come here. And actually, if we're going to try to get the council to get away from silo working to actually people working together, it is good to encourage those links between departments and portfolios.
Okay. In terms of the report itself, I mean, I welcome it. Clearly, you've had a pilot which has worked successfully, and it's good to roll it out. The one concern I did have, and I did briefly talk about this with Michelle the other day, was we don't want to make this too bureaucratic for people, because there are issues around insurance, for example, and I understand that the City Council actually dealt with the public liability insurance for the Francis Avenue pilot. The question is, are we going to put that responsibility on residents' groups if we roll it out? That could be a potential deterrent for people. I know you're talking about suites of documents, and I've had a look at some of them, and they are fairly simple. Other councils have got very simple forms, and that's also very important as well. As I say, the only concern I really had was that we shouldn't try and burden people with too much bureaucracy, because that will put people off. So I hope we could maybe deal particularly with the insurance issues and maybe not lumber them with that responsibility, if at all possible.
Okay.
The third and final item relates to the school street closures. It is briefly mentioned in the report, and it says, I'll just, if I may briefly quote, it says, the aim is to branch out school street closures whereby roads outside schools are closed to allow pupils and parents to actively travel, etc., etc. I happened to sort of delve a bit into this, actually, and I discovered there was a item in the news back last year, October 2019. Unfortunately, I can't get hold of the report, because when I go on a page, it says page cannot be found. But this was actually reported elsewhere in a couple of other newspapers, including The Sun, would you believe? And it had a thing about...
I'm sure you're an avid reader, Graham.
Indeed, you see, I read all sorts of things, you see, in my research, just to find out about stuff, and I'm not unhappy to do this. It says, Portsmouth Council is considering removing to reduce pollution by banning cars in school streets. Now, what I was particularly interested in was the comment that came from one of the councillors, because it says here, schools decided for trial. It says, Councillor Susie Horton, Portsmouth City Council's Cabinet Member for Education, has decided on 2 schools to use as a trial for the scheme, which would affect hundreds of families. The head of Fernhurst School has a quote. I was interested that some sort of announcement seems to have been made back last April that we were going to go ahead with this, yet according to this, we're going to wait for the rollout of the other scheme before we actually consider the school street closures. Now, I would have thought that there's some merit in having a pilot of the school street closures, because actually a number of local authorities have already done this. Islington ran one in 2018. The other one that was interesting was Hackney, who apparently, according to their press release, said they sent a school streets toolkit to every council in the country, giving them advice on how to replicate their successful scheme back in May 2019. I mean, it seems to me that it was 10 months since we said we were going to go ahead with this, and I'm not quite sure why we need such a delay on piloting school street closures. We should at least be doing a pilot, not waiting, another year maybe or more before that happens. One final point, on the classification of roads, I found this in a report from 2011, which actually shows you what the classified roads are. I must admit, I didn't know which ones are which until I looked at this. And I think it's important that we clarify for residents which roads they can have closures in, because some roads are out. There are some roads which it says are dual purpose, and I don't know whether those are included in ones we can have closures or whether we can't have closures. Also things like bus routes and bin collection dates. We also need to clarify that for people about when they can close the roads. So
Okay.
those are really my main
That's
comments.
so I think we've got a range of different
have.
questions there. So my understanding is from Michelle's thing was that we are looking for Sunday afternoons and there are no bin collection rounds on Sunday afternoons, so that won't be an issue. Michelle, any other bits and pieces to pick up from Graham's questions?
As we said yesterday, we'll make the documents as easy as possible, because the idea is for residents to be able to be empowered and to be able to do this themselves. Within that, obviously, we have technical terms that we use within the council, classified roads, etc., etc. We will make sure that it is as clear as possible and run it past our communications officers before we publish anything. The classified roads, well, obviously, there are some restrictions. There's no point trying to promote community cohesion if we then block out another part of the community by not allowing a bus route. So there will be, on a case-by-case basis, as these requests come forward, we will make a measured decision about whether or not that road is suitable to be closed. Some roads don't, although there may be buses during the week, they don't have them on a weekend, or it may be possible with the services to time them around that. But we have all of that information within our department, so as residents come forward, we can certainly help them with that, make that assessment, and that will obviously be in the guidance as well. So, and in relation to school streets, we have the Super Zone pilot. So that's a year-long pilot that started, and it's cross-working between planning, public health, regeneration, education, and it's centred around Arundel Court School, and it is obviously primarily to address the childhood obesity problems, but through a very proactive way of looking at how people travel to school and then linking it into planning about what type of shops and takeaways are given, planning permission to go in a certain area. So school streets will form part of that. So that pilot is going ahead it started in January, and when Arundel Court have shifted over, because their school has been rebuilt into a new building, so when they're moving into their new building, then we will start the transport side of it, walking to school. They've booked Stomper, so he's going down for a half term to do, Stomper's challenge, etc. So we are, over the course of the year, there will definitely be progress through of this pilot.
Okay, I've got Steve and Susie.
Thanks very much, Michelle. Susie and I, as ward councillors for the street where this pilot happened, have been very enthusiastic about this. I'm very pleased that one of the residents who led on this has actually joined us today, because she's very interested and passionate about it. Hi, Laura. And there's a bit of a disconnect between a couple of things you said, Graham, and I get why, but if we start loading up whole lists of different streets and why they may or not be suitable, etc., it takes the human side out of it. And I think one of the reasons why this report needed to come to Cabinet is it's not a traffic project, it's a people project. The traffic is the incidental bit that needs to move out of the way to create the space for the people. So it's very much about community, and therefore I think it really does sit across directorates. the change that happens in an area by closing off a road and allowing the people to come back outside and relax and actually just be is amazing. The house on the corner of Francis Avenue, where I actually partially grew up, living with my grandparents there for a while, I hadn't met the current owners, but they came out and started chatting. Next thing, they came out with cakes and was distributing them around the other residents. We had a long chat about the history of the house. They hadn't engaged with anybody in that environment before. There were a number of residents who came outside and spoke to their neighbours in a way that they never have. So this is very, very much a people thing. And although the report has to talk about the process, I think we mustn't lose focus about the fact that this is about encouraging community cohesion, helping to create safer neighbourhoods because neighbours are more aware of each other, giving children more confidence, and giving the family unit time to spend the ability to spend time with each other. Our ward is the most densely populated council ward outside London. It has virtually no green space. We don't have the options to improve a park because there is virtually nothing available. So this is a really powerful tool for us, and it has to be rooted in the community. So the other bit of it, just a clarification, the council didn't pay for the public liability insurance. In order to kickstart the whole process, Susie and I actually paid for that out of our own pockets. Because there was going to be a delay around process and admin. We were delighted to do it because this is actually a real priority. The setup with the community group will enable them to hold that collective insurance and facilitate that for other streets as well. So we know the plan will work. We know that there is some process that has to be gone through around the legal side of it, but I know that Michelle and the team are working really hard to make sure that that is as simple as possible. The information we have that sits behind what the residents need to fill in is a different thing, but we'll make it. And actually, once you've applied for one and you've done the first one with a bit of hand-holding and a bit of support, it's very simple to keep repeating that process, is it not?
So as if it grows in popularity and residents want a regular road closure, say for instance once a month or once every 2 months, then for existing special events within the city we put in one order at the beginning of the year to the Secretary of State, which has all of our pre-planned events on it. So the end game is to have regular play streets added to our special events order that's advertised at the beginning of the year, and then it's done for the whole year for those residents that are proactively wanting them every 2 months or something.
Okay, Susie?
Okay, so some of what I was going to say Steve's covered already, but I'd just like to thank Laura, name checker, who's here today, for really having the enthusiasm to kick this off. In actual fact, I see this as so much bigger than the Play Streets thing, and actually I've been wanting to do one for about 2 years, ever since I went to a Sustrans meeting which was talking about them about 2 years ago. So Laura gifted me with the opportunity when she managed to get in the paper when the road was closed for putting the speed bumps in, and her kids were out there, so we jumped on her, not literally, but we jumped on her, and she has been brilliant. But also I'd like to thank the officers, because actually I think this is a really good example of the community and the council working really equally, actually, because if it wasn't for Laura's efforts and the organisational skills behind it, we would have found it difficult to get it off the ground. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. I get what Graham's point about the bureaucracy and everything, and I think there's been a lot of thought that's gone into that to minimising that, and I get the point about we have to manage expectations about not anyone can say I want to play street next week in my road, which happens to be a main road. So there's a lot of work around that, but I'm very optimistic about the committee or the group that's set up and being able to manage that, and already they've got a Facebook page and everything which has got a lot of engagement in, so I think that's good. On the school streets, I really think, although it is mentioned in this document, they are completely different. Shutting a play street for a couple of hours once a month or once every 3 months or whatever is very different from the school street stuff, which is about managing traffic, as Michelle's already highlighted, on a day-to-day basis. There are quite a few schools who have said to me, when I've been speaking to them, I'd like to be a school street. I don't know whether they know the impact of that and the managing the expectations of their parents, etc. So that's a big change in behaviour, and you're absolutely right, Michelle's highlighted the Arundel Court pilot. So we've got a couple more people who are interested in the area around Francis Avenue. I think I've got to be realistic about this. You know, the first one was real big success. It actually takes work to keep these things successful, and if they're not successful, then there's there may be a chance that, the enthusiasm could go. So I don't think we can underestimate the amount of work by the community that will be needed to make them work. But when they do work, and Steve is right, it is really quite an amazing impact on the community.
Okay. I have Lynn.
Thank you. I'm absolutely delighted that this is coming about, because I tried to get this through in 2011 and there were lots of objections to it at the time. And this came about from, I ran a street party for the royal wedding, and the kids in the street just had a wonderful time. And it took me back, because I'm that old that I remember only 2 cars in my street. So I spent most of my childhood out after school playing in the street, and the freedom of it was just wonderful. And I went down to Francis Avenue when the Play Street was on, and it was delightful to see the same sort of thing that was happening when I was a kid. I mean, I was talking to, there was the whole range, the generations, there was an old chap I was talking to, and he said, this reminds me of when I was a kid, and everybody working together, and that's another reason why I totally agreed with it coming to Cabinet and not coming just to TNT, because it covered such a wide range. So there was the mixture of generations, and kids being able to play together with each other. They live in the same street, but because of traffic going back and forth, they can play in each other's houses, but they don't normally have the chance to play in the street together. And they did. They were all mixing, and that was really good. And I think it's important as well, and I'm totally supportive, and I would encourage residents to actually take responsibility for doing some things themselves, instead of expecting the council or somebody needs to do something about it. No, you take responsibility. If you want to do it, you do it, and let's give them all the support we can, because we can't do everything for everybody, and we shouldn't be doing everything for everybody. So I think for residents, families to get together and do things themselves is great. And Bristol has been doing this sort of thing for many, many years, because when I was interested in 2011, I discovered that in Bristol, lots of streets were doing it the first Sunday of every month or whatever, on a monthly basis, and I think to progress to that would be great. So I totally support it.
Thank you much, Lynn. Finally, Lee.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. So I'm going to something that Councillor Orton said about, even shutting down main roads. I remember going to a meeting, Leader, about Fratton Road. Everybody came and said, we can't shut Fratton Road off, it's a main bus route and all that sort of thing. And lo and behold, like 5 years down the road, we have Love Fratton Road Day, very successful event every day of the week. And of course, I remember the Jubilee events, celebrating the Queen's birthday, so the streets get shut off. This kind of regularises in a better way that approach. I'm terribly intrigued as to why Councillor Heaney would want to come here and say, well, why is this report here? It's here because it's of considerable public interest, I would have thought, and I don't know about the rest of my colleagues here, but even if there's something that doesn't need to come to my particular portfolio, as officer's president will tell you, if it's of public interest, and as Cal Corkery will tell you, I will talk about anything in my portfolio. I think anything that needs airing should come and be aired and give it that public scrutiny. So I do hope, Graham, this is not an indication of ever Labour would take control of the City Council, that you would start to not bring reports that ought to be here or should be here or could be here and not bring them here, because the inference this morning is that might well be the case. And that's it, Leader.
Thank you. Colleagues, we've got the recommendations.
Chair.
Beg your grant, sorry.
Councillor Hunt named me, so I think I would like to respond.
I'm sure that's fine.
I don't think he quite listened to what I actually said, which was what I said was I wasn't sure why this came to Cabinet instead of the TNT Cabinet member. I didn't say it shouldn't come at all. I never actually said that, and I worked it. So he's misrepresenting what I was saying.
Okay, so Lee, I'm not...
Yeah, very good. I did hear him, therefore, I did hear him very correctly.
Thank you. Gentlemen, let's see if we can concentrate on the main issue, which is this is a good thing for the people of the city, a good thing where different bits of the council are working together, and that we're able to provide support for communities to be able to do the right thing for people within their community, and let's leave the party politics to one side. So, colleagues, are you happy with the report as it is? Yes, thank you. Okay, Fiona, a good idea. I'm getting warm as well. Okay, next thing. Graham, thank you for coming. Let's move on to item 6, proposed Halifax and Falkland Island sister city links. Claire, anything to add to the report?
Leader, thank you. No, I think the report speaks for itself. We've outlined why the cities are potentially important to us and how they can both support and acknowledge the historic links we have with both cities, which are considerably longer, I think, than a lot of people appreciate, but also the potential, certainly with the Halifax one, for the economic development and the trade. Yep. I'd be very happy to take any questions.
Okay, Steve?
Thank you, Leader. These proposals are in line with our determination to be a global city, and we have, as Claire said, much stronger links with both of these destinations than we might have otherwise been aware. Every time I tell somebody that the Falkland Islands Company owns the Gosport Ferry, somebody definitely surprised in the room. But they do, and an awful lot of their children go to school locally in the area, and they own property here, and members of their government come over, as we discovered, when 3 of them came and shared with us when we started flying the ensign down at Old Portsmouth, their flag rather, down at Old Portsmouth. So there are definite strong links there with the Falklands, and in terms of our links with Halifax, we know that the university are very keen to grow the number of students that they're attracting from Canada and want to work with us on this. They've been very enthusiastic. We've also seen that the links over the current shipbuilding contracts will foster closer links between the cities, but this has to be all about where there are economic benefits as well as cultural benefits to doing this, rather than just twinning for the sake of it, as it were. Yeah. So the economic case is very clear in both of these examples, and we look forward to seeing them develop.
Okay, I think, Steve, you're absolutely right about the economic stuff. It's BAE have been successful the first time since I think the 1970s in selling a warship designed to other nations. So the Type 26 frigates designed here in Portsmouth are going to be built in Halifax and also in Australia. So that's continuing work. The build stuff happens there, but lots of the components come from the UK, and the design tweaks, etc., will happen here in Portsmouth. So it's sustaining jobs in Portsmouth and recognising those links. So this seems a sensible thing. My apologies, Claire, that I thought the link only went back to 1780, and thank you for your research to say it was back to 1759. I'm glad one of us remembers. To look on Google. To finish the sentence. So colleagues, anybody else? Are you happy with this, folks? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, domiciliary care, Andy. No. Paul, beg your pardon.
Hello. So this is presenting the report. We've got colleagues here from Housing and Adult Social Care, and arises from joint working between the two directorates, and that's why it's come here today, because it's a cross-portfolio issue. Ian Gibson Court is a sheltered housing scheme managed by the Council's local authority housing service based in Somerstown, and is a category 2.5 sheltered housing scheme for those who are over 55. And in the past, many of the residents were in receipt of packages of care from the Council's Adult Social Care Service, provided through a range of commercial providers. 2017, a joint review of this service identified there was potential to improve the quality of domiciliary care, and a mini-check intervention process using the systems thinking method was undertaken, and the recommendation from redesign was that the domiciliary care service for Ian Gibson Court residents was brought within the sheltered housing service. And it should be noted that this complements the adult social care service-wide strategy for 2018 to 21. The service was registered with the Care Quality Commission, and the work began in September 2017 with a purpose of providing the right care at the right time, and has delivered packages of care to 37 different clients on a daily basis. The clients report they're exceedingly pleased with the service, and the average satisfaction score is 9.78 out of 10. Section 4.4 of the report provides some sample quotes of residents about their care, with one saying, "I like to talk to them and they talk to you. This makes me feel human and included." And another said, "They're always on time, they're friendly and do everything I want them to. Everything is really good, I have no problems with all my care at all." The service was inspected by the CQC in September 2018 and again last November, and at that time was found to have reached the standard in good in all areas with an overall good CQC rating. And overall, both directorates, supported by evidence from the residents, are content that this new way of working provides a better service without significant additional cost and would like it to be made permanent. Senior management officers from both directorates have had continuing oversight of the pilot and agree the basis for the recommendations. Regarding the finances, there is a small increase in cost to adult social care, which officers from directorates working with finance have worked to find resolve, and that's outlined within the report. But it should be noted that the cost of care to residents, for those who do make a financial contribution, would not be affected by this change.
Anything else, Paul? I'm going to move you on.
Moving forward, the best way to support the work for in Gibson Court is to do a new phase of the pilot, which could be a trial at Hale Court or cluster of services in homes within the Somerstown area. Officers have not yet done the scoping to confirm which would be the best way, but regardless of the pilot, the usual method would be followed to ensure customers at the heart of what we do, and that's outlined in 7.7. So finally, the recommendations of the report are as outlined in section 2.
Okay, very sensible thing to do in my view. My mum was in a McCarthy Stone extra care place where the home care was provided by the staff who worked there, and it worked extremely well because you knew the people. And it cut down all the travelling as well, so it was a very sensible thing to do. When the last few months of her life, I was talking to the doctors in Southampton General and said she got 4 care visits a day in Lymington. They were stunned because nobody could get 4 care visits a day in Lymington because the home care agencies just couldn't provide it. So it was a better a service in almost every way. Darren.
Thank you, Leader. I support this project and this report entirely. I think it's actually one of the interesting things about what we've discussed today is how this council under this administration is actually tackling some of the long-term issues that government is frankly too scared to. Whether it's making Portsmouth greener through enhancing recycling options, whether it's making Portsmouth safer through the Play Streets option, or in this case whether it's making Portsmouth fairer by actually having something that returns the human touch that Gerald actually started talking about. We are committed to, we passed a motion around the Unison's Ethical Care Charter, and this is one way in which we're actually starting to put our money and our time and our muscle where our mouth is. And I think one of the other things that's reflected in all 3 reports is also the humanity of it all, and Gerald's points around the human touch. This is less Portsmouth PLC than actually making Portsmouth fairer, cleaner, greener and safer, and actually putting humans first as opposed to money first. And that way you'll get not only a better city, but also you'll actually make money in the process. So I'm delighted with this report, and I'm delighted we're tackling the long-term issues. I only hope that central government is as proactive as we are. Thank you, Gerald.
Colleagues, are you happy with this? Oh, Matthew, sorry.
Thank you, Gerald.
Can you do your mic slightly closer?
Yeah,
so
sorry,
we can
thank you.
hear?
Sorry, Lee. Yes, I think the area that I really want to. Oh, by the way, I have no declarations of interest because you never asked me when I came in. And apologies for being slightly late. Yeah, I think the really important thing is 4.3, which is the 9.78 out of 10. That's the most important thing here. It's about what is better for our residents. This is a fantastic scheme of working together across 2 portfolios. But actually, let's not even talk about portfolios. This is about people This entire meeting so far has been about how we work together across the council, right across the council, to provide better lives for our residents. And that 9.78 out of 10 average satisfaction score is quite frankly stunning. Now, you don't get that. You do not get that kind of satisfaction for anything, but we have it here, and it's real. So this is a fantastic scheme. I'm really pleased that the pilot has gone so well. I'm really pleased that we want to roll this out and get it right. And even though, as it says in the report, this is and as Paul has mentioned, it is a slightly more cost to adult social care. Actually, it isn't. It might be up front slightly more cost, but we are talking about something that is going to save money in the future. Not because it's about saving money, but because you are going to keep people happier, healthier, more engaged, more able to live their lives the way they want to for longer, which means that they won't be on costs either in the NHS or social care further on down the line, because they are going to have better lives. And that is what this is all about, and that is all that we want to do, and this is a great scheme, and I really commend that and the report.
Okay. Colleagues, you happy, Paul?
Sorry, just one further point, and thanks for the really good comments. And Alison is here, who managed the scheme, and I'd really like to thank her and her team for the work that they've done in delivering this. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Alison, and everybody does the work. So thanks very much indeed. Are you happy with that, folks? Yep, lovely. That moves on to Andy, with provision of residential care in the city.
Thank you.
A quick introduction.
Yes. I will. Thank you, Leader. So the report's before you, and the purpose of the report is to update Cabinet as to the availability of care and provision for older people across the city, the likely demand based on the statistics and figures that we've currently got, and the impact of extra care development for people with dementia in the city, and to consider the costs of residential and nursing care that's owned and managed by the City Council and options for ensuring maximum value for money. And that's all within the context of the adult social care strategy and the adult social care medium-term financial strategy. So the context lists that out and puts some further detail around the strategy. Available provisions in residential and nursing care are listed on what is page 100 in your pack through into page 101. We've seen a change in ratings within the city through various work that's been done in terms of quality, in that more providers, we only have one provider currently in inadequate, who we're actively working with, and more providers have moved out either to requires improvement or to good. The picture of demand is complex. We have statistics that tell us that we're seeing a growing population of older people, and statistics that tell us we're going to see a growing population of people with dementia. But we also have currently a downward trend in making residential and nursing care placements within the city based on alternatives that provide care for people in their own home. Alludes to some of the stuff you've heard about in Gibson Court, but also care provided in people's owned homes. So what we've tried to do is put a sort of mid-range analysis taking into account those factors to give us potential numbers for a requirement for residential and nursing home care placements in the future. And those are listed through on pages 102 and 3 in tables 1, 2, 3 and 4. So if we continue to see a positive trend in downward, so not placing as many people, that's at the bottom number on those tables. If we don't see that trend continued and we take into account the potential rise in population, that's the upper number in those tables. Those are a midpoint, though there are extreme cases either side of those, but we were trying to go for some kind of happy medium. So the conclusion of that on page 104, we see ourselves purchasing between 151 and 238 beds for people who need a residential care home, and for people who need a nursing care home between 159 and 174 by 2025. So worst case could be a 90% increase or a 90% decrease, my apology, for best case, or worst case a 6% increase. And those are the numbers that we've come up with and that we will keep monitoring. We've started a different type of trend reporting in adult social care recently to monitor those figures and see how accurate they are to give us information to build on. We're also asked to consider the impact of extra care for people with dementia. People will be familiar with the fact that we've seen a levelling of the old Edinburgh House site in Portsmouth, up in the North City, and that will be used for building an extra care facility mainly for people with dementia. We don't have one of those in the city at the moment, so you've got a gap between the care that can be given to people in their own homes and residential care, and we think there's a cohort of people who don't need that residential care, but they need more than they can have living in a standard domestic environment, and that's what we aim that extra care will provide them with. We now have a flat site at Edinburgh, and so we're starting discussions about the design, the architecture, and all of those things that should bring a building within a couple of years, I believe is the current estimate. That will provide us with alternatives to residential care, but it also gives us an opportunity for people to move earlier to a solution than they may have done to res care. So those figures are difficult to calculate. We believe we'll see a further reduction in residential care. There is a summary of that. Moving on. We also did a calculation of the cost of residential nursing home care owned and managed by the City Council. We've seen a recent reduction in the portfolio of estate that we hold with the closure of Edinburgh and Hilsea Lodge. And we've compared ourselves against other local authorities for the facilities that we still provide in terms of Shearwater and Harry Sotnick House. We found that we're better value than many, but we still have a greater cost than in the independent sector. And so the recommendations speak to some options that we have to make the maximum use out of our estate, and those are listed on page 109 under 7.3. And so what we're asking from Cabinet in terms of the recommendations is to note the current and model demand that we've spoken about, to note the costs of the City Council in providing residential nursing care that it owns and runs, and to agree further work, to undertake further work as to the cost and feasibility of the options for maximising the value of those council assets. Take any questions.
Okay, Matthew.
Thank you, Andy. I specifically asked for this report to come to Cabinet as opposed to my portfolio meeting because, again, this crosses more than just adult social care. But also adult social care is the biggest budget in the council. I think it's important that things that have impacts on that like this are important to have here. Again, this is some really important work going on together with housing and with property services, looking at what our assets are, what we can make the most of, again, to provide the care that we need for people that people need, rather than being something where we provide something that people don't need or we just ignore the needs of our populations. So that's really important. I think what's also a really interesting part of this report is the comparators with other places. To be honest, one of the things that I was concerned about, particularly when we did the numbers, was that our costs for in-house providers compared to the private sector were much more. As Andy has said, that is mainly down to the fact that we pay a shift allowance, which we think is really important for our staff. We treat our staff well. That is one of the reasons why when we signed the residential care charter, that was one area where we were already living up to it anyway, and we have an aspiration that that will happen in private care homes over the years, with encouraging them to do that as good practice for people who live and work in this city in our care homes. But we do that in ours, and actually when you compare to other providers, so other authorities around the country, both our comparators and neighbouring authorities, we're actually a very good value, and we provide a very good service for a lot less money. For example, rather than it being £1,204 and 12 pence a week, is that a week, Andy? Mm-hmm. Yep, a week for our in-house care homes. In Slough, for example, it's £4,165 and 22 pence, and the comparator with other authorities similar to our own is Derby with 2,754. They're the highest ones. So we're actually good value, and we provide a good service that people value. The most important thing is people value our in-house provision. People are looking to the council to provide what people need, and they value the fact that we are doing that. So that is a really key part of our strategy going forward, to provide again what people need, but also to provide it in a way that is going to be the most financially viable for the future, where, as we know, care costs keep rising.
Thank you, Matt. Just a quick observation from me. It seems to me sensible to keep some flexibility. If private care home goes under, then we have to have the flexibility to be able to step in and to be able to sort that, to make sure that residents aren't left high and dry. My experience as well with some care providers is they're not interested in short-term placements, and if you're trying to get people out of hospital effectively for what would have been, I suppose, what's not recuperation, but re-enablement is what we call it now, but a convalescent home is what it used to be called. To get people out of hospital is a good thing, much cheaper, much better for people, and having that flexibility is right, I think, for the mixed economy in the city. So, again, I think this is sensible. Rob?
Leader, you've covered part of what I was going to ask, which is about 7.3, where you were saying you were considering, what to use it for, considering the mix in the city, and it's really about the specialisation that you're going to do there, but to remember to keep that flexibility, because I have to agree, the worrying thing is we can't always depend that the independent sector is necessarily going to be able to cope with specialisations required. So that's the point covered, actually. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, colleagues, are you happy with this? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on, item 9. Caroline, welcome. So, colleagues, this was an experiment which Caroline's going to talk to us about now, just to say what we did, why we did it, and what the result was. If you could do a quick introduction, that would be great.
I'm quite sure.
These having problems hearing, so you need to be clearly into the microphone.
Oh, excellent.
Okay, so, Matt Martin, do you want to say who you are?
Good morning.
Okay. Caroline, the floor is yours. Quickly.
Thank you, Leader. So, as many of you will be aware, since 2017-18, we've been implementing an upgrade of the street lighting within Portsmouth, replacing old technology for new LED technology. By doing that, we have saved 40% on our energy, and we've been able to make sure we have a consistent lighting level which is coherent with British lighting standards across the city. Last year, we looked at how we could further utilise that technology. Throughout the installation process, we had been also installing a central management system called CMS, which enables us to create more of a smart city when it comes to our lighting. So we consider the needs of our city and also balance that against making additional energy savings. So we've worked with a consultant company called Hyperion Limited, who have supported other local authorities around the country to look at their adaptive lighting policies. And last summer we went through a trialling process. So within 5 areas of the city, we, having risk assessed the lighting, we could adapt. We went through a trialling process for 8 weeks. So we had one placebo area, and we invited 12,000 residents to make comment. So, and then looked at what feedback we'd received. And ultimately, there wasn't very much difference between the placebo area and the areas in trial in terms of what people noticed, because reducing energy to our lighting columns doesn't have a direct impact on what you can visually see. What reducing energy does do is it can reduce some of the glare that some residents have noticed when the LED has been installed, and we have had some positive feedback around that. In general, in both the placebo area and the trial areas, we had incredibly positive and satisfied feedback. There was a small amount of dissatisfied feedback, and in fact was mainly around perception. So people have still been a bit worried, potentially around what the impact of a reduced lighting level was. However, as we've said, it's very difficult to see it. So having done that, we went back and reflected and have come up with a profiling for the whole city based upon sound risk assessments which take into account traffic flow, rates of crime, the movements of our city. So, for example, the city centre remains quite vibrant until the early hours, and that would be an area we would not be looking to adapt the lighting in because of that. But more residential areas where it quietens down from 10 o'clock, we're looking to reduce the energy in the columns by up to 50% where it is safe to do so. And that is the proposal we've brought to you for approval today.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. I shall work down the table. So we'll start with Lee, and then Lynn, and then David.
Well, I was really looking forward to this report coming somewhere, and I'm glad it's come to the Cabinet because people need to know about this. And I remember there was some nervousness about whether or not we should ask residents, in an open way and tell them that this is going to happen. And it's really, really interesting, isn't it, to read on page 112 that, if I may, lead, I'll be very quick. It says key findings of the survey. This is really interesting, that although most respondents stated that they noticed a difference in the lighting levels during the trial, an even higher percentage noticed a difference in the placebo area, where the lighting levels were not adjusted than in the trial area, which implied those. So it is about perception. Of course, politicians are really, really nervous about upsetting people, and it's difficult to make change. And doing change is very difficult, whether it's one-way streets or whether it's anything around social services. It's very difficult to effect change. So this is a very open and transparent administration, and we ask people, we involve people. And to look at the sorts of savings that are being made, not just in economic terms, but in reducing the amount of CO2. I mean, on page 113 in 4.2, the forecast reductions in CO2 emissions are huge. Well, they're very considerable, rather. And we're taken together with everything else that this council, stroke administration, is doing. These are enormous savings and enormous reductions in CO2, from recycling through to LED lighting. And I'm very pleased that we're going to do it citywide. It's completely the right thing to do, and I'm enormously grateful for you bringing it to us in the first place and for helping us achieve what we want to do. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Lynn.
Thank you, Leader. Susie and I went to, I think we called it a demonstration one evening, and it was between Fawcett Road and Victoria Road North, and there were a representative bunch of people there. The people from the emergency services, there was somebody who was partially sighted, somebody in a wheelchair, community wardens, so a whole range of people, and they dipped the lights at various amounts, 25% initially, then 50%, and then 75%, and that was a bit dodgy. And it was really, really good. The thing that impressed me more than anything, where we were standing was between where we were standing and Victoria Road North, there was an alleyway. And I said, that is a potential problem area for, crime, etc. But they said, not a problem, because we can actually do individual ones so that they can keep the lights quite bright in those ones and dim them elsewhere. So I was sold straight away, because and everybody was in agreement. So it was a whole range of people. So it's not just officers doing it with a vested interest. It was people who had nothing to do with it at all. So I'm really delighted it's gone in, and I think from the point of view of savings, yes, for the city, but also the environmental savings as well. It's really good. Well done. Thank you.
David.
Okay. Well, a lot of what I said was covered by Councillor Hunt there.
Should we move on?
No. I was just going to say, because it's got on the appendix there. It just shows you how much. Carbon has been saved from this. Well, like 350,000 miles driven by an average passenger vehicle, stuff like that. That's really demonstrative of how this has actually been effective. And also, if I can just confirm, I think Hampshire Council to get some savings going, they decided to just turn some lampposts off for a few hours, whereas we've decided to go this route, which is much more environmentally friendly and, you know, adds to the carbon reduction that we're doing. So well done to the team on that.
Thank you. I thought the figures were very interesting in terms of customer approval, etc. But also, I think my back of the fact packet working this says that if we do this across the city, it reduces the carbon, the amount of CO2 we pump into the atmosphere by 700 tonnes a year, which is a really significant saving. Financially, it's £420,000 a year saving, which will go to be able to offset the issues with the PFI deal with COLAS. So this is sensible and actually, when I've been talking to people, the new street lights are perceived to be so much brighter than the old ones, which is really good for people feeling safe. But actually, it works to reduce it a little bit because people have felt that they are now, it's much brighter than it used to be. So thanks, I think it works all over. So colleague, Steve, sorry I went on for too long and
That's all right.
you snuck in.
That's all right, Leader. Just a point on that, there have been some genuine concerns from people around the increased brightness having an impact on wildlife. And it definitely does. Studies have shown that elsewhere. So my understanding is that by doing this, we actually lessen that impact. So there's another environmental benefit as well. And as you know, where animals are concerned, I get particularly intense.
Indeed. Okay. Thanks very much indeed. And thank you very much. That moves us swiftly on to Tristan, City Council's response to the climate emergency. Tristan, welcome.
Hi, so I'm Tristan Thorne. I'm the strategy advisor, climate change. I'll try and keep to the point, keep it concise. But so the strategy,
in which case you may be the first.
The strategy outlines the steps required to move PCC and the City of Portsmouth towards net zero carbon emissions by 2030. We've made a lot of progress over the last 10 years. However, this trajectory will plateau by 2025. All directorates across PCC have made positive steps, and we will all need to make further radical steps and take even more progressive action to reduce our emissions to net zero by 2030. So the first part of the strategy will identify and reduce the emissions attributable to PCC. We have complete control over our owned assets, so we can take significant steps to not only reduce our emissions, but also to lead by example. PCC also has a strong influence over the entire city's emissions. We will therefore need to take progressive steps to ensure that walking, cycling and sustainable transport are prioritised over car use, both by those living within the city and those travelling into the city. We will need to ensure that all of the Council's decisions consider climate change and carbon emissions. This has been developed by the new Integrated Impact Assessment form and can be further developed through a carbon budgeting system. We do concede that we cannot force change in all businesses and groups in the city. While PCC can lead by example and demonstrate good practice, we will need to provide guidance and support to Portsmouth residents. A measured behaviour change campaign will need to be enacted to encourage and facilitate actions which will reduce the city's carbon emissions. Further citywide climate action, such as community engagement and lobbying, will be driven by the Portsmouth Climate Action Board. The board's strategy currently includes conducting a city-wide carbon audit and holding a citizens' assembly to determine the public support for different levels of climate action. This is a first phase strategy. We will receive feedback on this document from partners in the city and are also inviting expert input from local partnerships, an organisation linked to the Local Government Association. We will revise the document in light of this feedback in the late spring and further update Cabinet at this point. So any questions?
Thank you. At that point I need to declare an interest, Tristan, as you have mentioned local partnerships, of which I am a director. Peter. Doesn't preclude me, but okay. Okay, thanks. I have got Rob, Lee, Lynn, David.
Thank you, Tristan. Just want to know if there's any modifications for your plans, given that the government have going to move forward the target to 2035 for petrol cars, etc. Because now it's in the framework of there are quite a few people, councillors here, or people who've been working the last 50 years, so it's now in our working timeline.
So shall we do questions, and Tristan, if you can pick them up at the end? Okay, Lee. It is you, unless there's somebody else called Lee in the room.
Well, thank you ever so much. It's very kind of you to come and do the report to us today, and you presented it really well. And but for me, on page 130, I'd love to put in, you could list on the whole page what we've been doing, and my favourite ones is always that Portsmouth has been crowned the champion of all the councils in, I think in Britain, was it Britain or the South East region, for installing solar panels onto schools, and indeed leading the way in partnership with West Sussex and a whole range of other councils. So, as you say, we are leading by example, which is the note that I made there. But, you know, at the risk of, does this go to council, this strategy?
No, it is here and here alone.
Yeah.
I have exactly the same question, Lee.
Pardon?
I have the same question you're about to ask.
Well, I don't know if it is. It's just disappointing to me. When I was an opposition spokesperson and something like this would come along, I would come here and give Mr. Hancock or anybody else, you know, a bit of a grilling, you know, asking you why aren't you doing this or why aren't you doing that, and at the risk of being small c political, I do not see any opposition spokespersons here. So forgive me for saying it, but the whole way through this, we do get hammered in the council and told we're not doing nearly enough. We've appointed Tristan here, so I won't labour the point terribly, but I hope that I've made it well enough. It's a very important matter. We're being told we've got to do more all of the time, and I really do welcome any more fresh ideas. I'm a really open person and want to involve all those other people in the council, but they're not here, so it would have been very interesting to hear them, and so one has to assume therefore that they approve of what we are doing, which is the positive point out of it, I would hope. So much obliged to every single officer that is helping us achieve what we are planning to do and that we have promised to do. So that's about it, Leader. Thank you very much.
Lynn?
I think it's great what we're doing, but there's still a hell of a lot more to go. And one thing I've mentioned before, and I'll say it again, I think we should be far more cross-portfolio working. Planning, for example, should be, in my opinion, I'm saying that all new developments must have solar panels or other alternative energy supplies, rather than, because a lot of it's not just transport that is causing a lot of the emissions which are affecting climate change, but it's things like gas boilers. I mean, pumping out loads and loads of CO2. And so we need to actually say that this should be happening. We should have solar panels. Now, in my ward, we have a development which was built by Drum Housing Association, which I don't believe exists now, which has got solar panels. That's all is used to heating. And I've spoken to two people living in two separate homes there, and they say they hardly ever need to use the heating, because the whole thing, the bricks that they use are special bricks that keep out the heat in summer and the cold in winter. So that's the way using supplementary planning documents, we should be going down that road and being far more ambitious than we are. And even things like, I mean, I personally love them, lots of people hate them, but I think wind turbines are another thing we should be looking at. I think they're beautiful, but there we are. So, but cross-party, that is not to detract from what you've already been doing. I think it's brilliant, but we've still got a hell of a long way to go.
Thank you. David?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to see this come in. This has been a big priority for the council. Obviously, it's been a big priority for my portfolio, so I'll get the mic closer as I can there. One of the things I liked when you were speaking, Tristan, you said, we've got to start, be more aggressive. I think you said the word aggressive. And I like that because sometimes politicians and stuff can be a bit more fluffy or woolly about it. And I think, no, it's too late. We do need to be aggressive. It doesn't, we're in a climate emergency. You don't nicely try and treat an emergency. You just get stuck in. So, yeah, I think that's a really good use of language there. I'm glad that this goes like the whole breadth of issues as well. It's not just concentrated on one thing, it's a whole gamut of things. You've got the 4 priorities down there, and it involves things like our housing and stuff, and like Lynn said about planning, it all needs to be involved in there. We've been trying to go through this, cross-party. We've had different cross-party meetings on different things. For whatever reason it hasn't worked, the others haven't been able to come there or whatever. So now we're looking at, when we had a meeting with the Climate Action Board with the leader there, we want to expand that so it's not just environment portfolio holders, it'll be other portfolio holders and spokespeople in there. Let's try and make this, let's try and encourage more spokespeople to get there, and so we can all have a joined up approach on this, which is what it should be. It's good to see also on this the Friends of the Earth audit, the checklist we've got. If you've noticed, Friends of the Earth come up with some suggestions that they've given to councils. On the appendix there, we've got green ticks where we're hitting, amber ticks, where we could be doing better, or things that are next on the list there. So that's good as well. We really do want to work with local community groups like Extinction Rebellion, Friends of the Earth, the Climate Action Board, as I've already mentioned. So yeah, these are great steps on there. I do run out of I do run out of superlatives to describe the teams we've got there. You've got Tristan there, the Climestones, Kelly Nash, kind of thing, Richard Lee over there with the air quality thing. But we are, resources are stretched, but we're still managing to get this done. And the lack of regulatory powers, funding, etc. It can be really frustrating when you see, when you think, if they'd have given us more money, we could have done this with the buses, we could have gone electric or something. But I know that Councillor Stagg here is working to get a bus depot, to help with that, because the buses were saying there's no infrastructure here to do that. So all these things are all overarchers, and yes, I am really, really glad to see that finally we've got the integrated impact assessments on all the things on there. So that it's not just the equalities now, it's the ecology, the environment, that sort of thing. I won't go on any further because I can see you glaring at me, but yeah, I could run out of things to say on this, but yeah, absolutely fantastic effort. Thank you.
David, I have never been accused of glaring. Matthew.
Thank you. I think the most important thing to remember with any reports like this and about this going out for consultation is about people. So again, get away from the abstract. This is about the impact that climate change and climate emergency has on people, and the way we tackle it is doing things as people. So we do that as the individuals within the council, and we work together on this. And again, this is a massive cross-portfolio thing. So we have everything from, when you go through the priorities, you have property, you have energy, you have transport, waste, environmental improvements, and then we have our further opportunities and ambitions, which go right across things we can do as a council, but also you can do in your own homes and within the community, and about the next steps, how we're taking things forward, which includes the things of carbon champions, for example, governance of resources, how we actually manage this, and then adaptation, which is all about things like our coastal defences. So that is a really, really huge thing. And so actually, if you put it as an abstract, it can seem absolutely massive. But if you think about it in context to how it relates to you as individuals within your communities, and you as communities working together on this, you can really see what difference it makes. And obviously this goes for everyone from the very youngest children to the very oldest adult. I think the really important thing here as well, and I'm really looking forward to the responses we get back from the consultation, is about what people can do themselves within their communities. So how can they do it? It's not all about the council. This is a really good thing about this strategy and going out for consultation, is it's not just about what the council's going to do. Because actually, so for example, and one thing I was particularly passionate about in there, and this goes back to going to a conference a few years ago, is about community energy generation. So actually little groups of people, even just a few houses in the streets, people can get together and they can generate their own electricity, and then they can manage their own electricity, and then they can sell back any excess to the grid. I think that's brilliant, and I think those kind of things, little things, and people can buy into them as well. I think that's a really important thing. People can buy into these kind of ideas and how they can do it. It's not about what someone else is doing to them. So I'm really excited by the strategy going out for consultation, going out for comment, and I really hope it will be something that we can be a real beacon for not just our area in Hampshire, but across the entire country for the way that our city combats the climate emergency.
Okay, Steve.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, just quickly, it's referenced in here, the greening strategy. That's something we've been pulling together across different bits of the council and also working with Friends of the Earth on. I've been very clear with people that we need to concentrate that effort into the areas in the city where we have the greatest exceedance at the moment, because we need to be doing, we can't wait until the government decides they want to enforce a clean air zone on us because it ticks some silly box that somebody in Whitehall wrote in a report. What we actually need to do is get on with it now and start improving the air quality in those areas. So we're going to look at greening around the Alfred Road junction and Church Street roundabout, because that's where it's at its worst and that's where we need to get on with it. We're also actively seeking feedback from residents across the city. We've been doing it in our ward to ask them where we can plant trees, where we can put greening in, where we can get businesses to adopt on-street planting, where we can work with local schools, using one of Councillor Stagg's suggestion, which is get the schools to grow the trees and then move the trees onto parks and public spaces in 8, 10, 12 years' time, which is actually the cheapest possible way of providing that green infrastructure. So there is an awful lot to do, and that that greening strategy will be coming forth next month.
Okay, Joe. Joe, do all members get notification that this meeting is happening and what's on the agenda?
Yes, the Members' Information Service will, and also there's a link to the agenda to all members of the council that's sent out when it's published.
Okay, so no, David, you've had your say. You go and have another one. You have, and your mum told me you should be. So I can understand in some ways when we had the last council meeting, our Conservative colleagues voted against the motion on climate change, and so there is a logic for them not being here. But our Labour colleagues were very keen on this, and I think it is really disappointing that none of them have come today. In my view, it is, you cannot solve the climate emergency just by one party. You have to have people working together, and I'm keen that that's what we do. So I'm disappointed that they're not here to try to work together to try to make a difference here in the city. But we'll have to think of ways in which we can encourage them to not just say things but to do things as well. Colleagues, are you happy for this to go out to consultations? Rob, no, I'm sorry we've come to the end of this.
No, I'm waiting for an answer.
Oh, you were asking for an answer, sorry. So the change, Tristan, the change in the time when people can register new petrol and diesel cars, will that make a difference to this strategy?
It will have a direct impact on this strategy because our target was already 2030.
So the answer then is no?
No. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, folks, thanks very much. Are you happy with this, colleagues? Yes. Thank you very much indeed. Richard.
Yes, thanks, Tristan.
Mr. Lee.
Hello there.
Anything you wish to add to the report?
No, but I'd like to clarify a few points.
Yeah,
if that's okay
leap
with
in.
members.
Leap in.
Okay. This report was first requested by Councillor Hunt and then escalated to full Cabinet. The report itself looks at the implications of a potential, it's worth identifying the word potential, free trade deal with restrictions upon the functions at the Portsmouth International Port and Portico, following the conclusions of the UK-EU withdrawal discussions, which are taking place this year. I think the purpose of the report and the recommendations are clearly set out within Section 1 and Section 2, and they focus upon the risk to regulatory services and the Port Health Authority, and identifies the financial concerns also with regards to those risks. The main section to focus on, I believe, is Section 4. It highlights that the current demands placed upon regulatory services at the port equate currently to around about a single FTE, which is shared between the officers within regulatory services, and that Trading Standards currently has no responsibilities at the port.
The port deals with low-risk products, hence the need for a low number of officers facilitating the port's requirements, and those products are of a non-animal origin. This is a result of the port's designation, which is a border control post. It has that status, which has recently been given to it, which restricts and prevents products of an animal origin coming through the port, entering the port. But it's worth highlighting that this does not relate to roll-on, roll-off activities, and that we believe there is a possibility that the focus upon RoRo activities may change during or after the withdrawal discussions, and therefore at some point the responsibilities of regulatory services may increase. The discussions with the government remain unconfirmed in respect to RoRo, hence the need for this report, because we are trying to predict what those implications might be, and indeed the ability of the port to facilitate products of an animal origin being imported through it. So if the checks are being introduced, then it's highly significant in terms of regulatory services and our ability to deliver whatever those checks may be. The checks themselves are highlighted in section 5. I don't believe I need to go through them, but effectively they are of three types: documentary, identification, physical, which may include sampling of some products in due course. Section 6 really focuses on the question mark in relation to trading standards and the possibility of the functions and responsibilities of that team in relation to the importation of products and the safety and standards of those products being imported through the port. What I'm saying there is any increase in the responsibilities of regulatory services, particularly in regard to trading standards, as there are none currently, will obviously be relatively large. Section 7 provides an example of what the checks might look like in relation to fish catch certificates. And Section 8 confirms that our engagement with government at this stage in relation to our readiness in terms of dealing with potential checks is currently considered as low. Section 9 highlights the need for staff with the correct level of qualification and expertise to perform port house functions as part of regulatory services responsibilities. And Section 10 summarises the risks, all of which focus around the need for suitable staff, the ability to employ those staff, the lead-in times in regard to recruitment should checks be required, and the lack of available revenue funding status to employ those staff should those checks indeed materialise. So in summary, the report highlights the concerns that any increase in demand for regulatory services down at the port will be unable to be matched by the resources currently available to the service, and then should those checks be required, even if the funding be made available, the lead-in times to recruit those staff is significant. And it's for that reason the recommendations are set out within Section 2. Any questions?
So, Richard, we gave a copy of this briefing to Grant Shapps, the Secretary of State for, well, I gave it to him, Secretary of State for Transport, in November. Have we heard anything back from him? Because he was keen, so he said, for there to be more trade coming through the Portsmouth International Port. Have we had a response from government?
I've had no direct response from that individual. Of course, there are communications with government continuing through this process as it develops, as those discussions develop.
Okay. I think the other people who it would be useful to send this report to would be the LGA body dealing with Brexit. Kevin Bentley, who's Deputy Leader of Essex, has been very supportive of us over that process, and it would be good to send this to him. I've highlighted this at the LGA National Executive, and they are aware of this, and they regularly meet ministers, and that would be helpful. But it seems to me it would be prudent for us to be prepared for the UK to moving on to World Trade Organization rules with trade with the EU, and if we're not prepared and it then happens, that's a problem. If we are prepared, we get a better deal than that, such is life. But this is clearly a national issue, and will need to be sorted out at a national level, because if people just aren't available and can't be trained in the next year, then there's a very significant problem or potential problem for trade. So if we could send stuff off to the LGA, that would be good, and I think we probably need to chase our MPs to get a response from Grant's chaps. So we gave it to him in November and it's now February and we still haven't had a response. That's not so good. Okay, so I'm going to work the other way up the line. So we've got Darren and Matthew. Lee, Darren and Matthew.
Well, thanks, Leader. I was very grateful when I asked the questions before the UK left the EU, and several months back I spoke to Mr. Lee, and I said, you know, what would the impact be on the port? And then, of course, I listened to this, and I immediately went to see yourself, the Leader, to inform you how things were shaping up. And of course, actually, we still really don't know. And you're right, it is a prudent report, and I'm grateful for the detail in the report. But the consequence of this is, of Brexit, and it has happened, and we accept that, the consequence is now that I would say the likelihood is there has to be more presence by trading standards down at the port in due course. If that is the case, then it has to be funded. If it were not to be funded, and the team had to relocate a part of its resources there, then that would affect the City Council's ability to deal with scams and to seize assets under the proceeds of crime, and indeed to look after all of our health, because this is a cross-pollinating team. That's how I refer to it. They all interact, they all do each other's jobs, their expertise is shared, and then they wouldn't be able to look after our food in the restaurants and so on. And indeed around safety at work. All these things would be impacted if they had to do it out the current funding. So that means that the funding has to come from general taxation, from the government, or the council taxpayer will have to pay. Some people say, well, the port can pay, but, you know, the profits that come out of the port come into the revenue funding here in any event. So in the end, if this is it's a small if now, if this is a consequence of Brexit, the council taxpayers will either pay, or the council taxpayers will pay out of general taxation via the government. So one way or another, we are going to pay. But we do need to ensure and be prepared, as Mr. Lee has said, and you have said, Leader, as well. So this is a prudent report. It is not an alarmist report. It's a factual report based on evidence brought to us by a very competent officer who knows exactly what he and his team are talking about. So I welcome the report, and at least we are aware of what's coming down the line.
Okay, thank you. Darren.
Thank you, Gerald. And thank you very much, Mr. Lee, for this open and honest report about the situations that we face, and it shows yet again that this council is actually taking the lead on the long-term things that affect this city, one of which is going to be our future relationship with the European Union. I think one of our roles as an administration is to try and bring this city back together again after the divisions of the last 3.5 years, and that means being open about what is on offer. Steve mentioned a global city earlier on, but also open about the problems that we face. And it is clear that unless something changes, if we continue down either the Canada partnership route or the Australian deal that doesn't exist with the European Union, then if nothing changes and we don't get any more money, then there is significant damage to our port's ability to function, and that means significant damage to our city's economy. I don't think anybody in this city wants that, and I'm delighted that you've highlighted that now, so that we can try and work on this long-term problem together and see if we can actually try and make Brexit work. but this report does suggest that there are real problems along the way, and there may be real damage to our port unless government stumps up the money. It should not be people in this city who have to pay because of government policy.
Okay, Matthew?
What really concerns me about this report and concerned me when Richards came to speak to us about this prior to this meeting is how effectively we are now on the pathway that the Prime Minister has very clearly set out, that there will not be regulatory alignment with the European Union, that we will not follow their rules on any trade deal that he wants to broker, which has also been confirmed by the Foreign Secretary, which means that what is in this report will happen and we will be stuck with. And we gave this report to Grant Shapps in November and we have had no response. So the government knows this is an issue, and I have not heard anything from the government either before the election or after the election, any acknowledgement at all about the utter chaos it will cause ports in this country. It won't just be Portsmouth, it will be every single port because of the particular thing, but it particularly affects us because of the nature of the kind of food we import. We only import non-animal products as an import of food. With roll on, roll off, it's completely different, but if there's no regulatory alignment, we will have to do checks on those, where of course a lot of our meat products come in via that way and animal products. So I'm really quite angry. I'm quite angry we're in this situation. I'm quite angry with the fact that we are in a place whereby they're just, even if we got the money, there aren't the people to do the work. And what is that going to mean? I don't know. I don't know how our port's going to function. I don't know how we're going to able to manage. But we're stuck with it. And the government knows this, and the government are ignoring it, and the government are lying to people. They are absolutely lying to people. Because they say having a Canada or Australia style agreement, or as Councillor Sanders said, non-agreement when it comes to Australia, having an agreement will mean we have to do checks. And they know this, and I don't think they care. So yet again, we are standing up for the people of Portsmouth to deal with something the government is making happen to us. They need to get on, and they need to give us money, they need to give us resources, they need to make sure that our port can function. This report sets that out in very clear terms, and I'm really pleased that's come. And as Councillor Sanders said, it's an open and honest report. It is absolutely important that we are completely clear. For the people of this city, we need funding and resources now, because the government is on the route. They have made it very clear that they don't want regulatory alignment. Therefore, we will have to have checks, and therefore the consequences of this report will happen.
Thanks, people. And can I add one more recommendation to this, that we contact the Secretary of State for Transport to ask for a response to the report we gave him in November, and that we lobby, we brief our Members of Parliament, the LGA and the British Ports Association to help lobby for us to get a solution to this. Colleagues, are you happy with those? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Can we now move to the highlight of today? Chris, Treasury Management, have you got anything you'd like to add to the report?
20 seconds.
19, 18.
This is your mid-year review. You'll recall that you approved a strategy at full council back in March. There's two note and recommendations within this report that essentially say that the council has remained within the strategy that you approved within March. No further comments, Chair.
Colleagues, are you happy with this report?
Yes.
Thank you. Let's move on to items 13 and 14, which is the budget. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go in a minute because I need to be in London this afternoon. but our job here is to pass this budget on to full council, for the council to be able to look at it. I don't think it's our job here to debate it in the same way we'll full council. But colleagues, can I draw to your attention the amended capital programme which is in front of you. Having had feedback from one of the cruise companies who we're trying to encourage to move from another port in the south of England to Portsmouth and to bring their business here, one of the things they've highlighted to us is a need to look at an elevated walkway for cruise passengers to be able to get from the new cruise bit of the terminal into the ships themselves. So we put that in terms of a piece of borrowing, but it'll need to be analysed in a business case like everything else before any money is spent to make sure that it actually does make financial sense. So that is the one change that to this. But overall, I think this is a sensible budget that looks in a responsible way about long-term solutions to problems in the city, and I would commend both of these reports and hope that we pass these on to full council. Steve.
Leader, I think you're selling us short. It's not a sensible budget. It's an ambitious and sensible budget. We have to note here that the plans in this capital budget are the most ambitious investment in green infrastructure and attacking the climate change issue that this city's ever had, and we should all be very proud that we've put that together, because it's been a huge amount of work. There's a hell of a lot more to do, but we shouldn't shy away from the fact that we are investing in that. We are investing in housing to make sure that local people, as Darren always likes to say, have homes that they can afford, and quite right too. We are investing in the dementia extra care to look after vulnerable people, and we are investing in our cultural and heritage assets. We said we would, and we are doing it. It's not sensible. It's something to be very proud of.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think looking at this must be the greenest council budget that we've ever had here at the City Council. The investment in the anaerobic digesters, in the wind turbines at the port, in electric vehicles at the port, in LED lighting, and the food waste trial are all taking us in that direction. Colleagues, are you happy to pass this on with that amendment to full council? Thank you very much indeed. I think that is it. Joe, anything we haven't done? Okay. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for your time. I think the rest of you, not me, are meeting over the way if people have a few minutes back in the civic offices for a few things. So thanks very much indeed. Bye-bye.